Hello, career thought leaders. Good to see you here today. And we are going to be talking about LinkedIn profiles and specifically the content piece and ways that you want to make sure you get in your own voice and ways that you might use AI tools. Today, I want to talk about the power of story and the power of your voice. Now, people often get confused when we talk about stories in LinkedIn profiles, right? Won't that be boring? People don't want to read it. How are you going to get a story in there? But the idea behind it is that you have an opportunity in your LinkedIn profile to engage readers, to have people really want to spend some time and learn more about you. It's not a resume where they've got, whatever, 10 seconds to look at it and then they've got to move on. LinkedIn profile still needs to be scannable and easy to read, but we want to use the space that we have there to really tell more of the story. So if you're joining us today, drop a little note in the chat, say hello. And if you're watching the replay, let us know that you're watching the replay. And what do you think about storytelling in LinkedIn profiles? How do we help our clients do that? And why is it so powerful? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe and the like button so that you'll get notified of when these videos come back. We come every Tuesday and talk about the now, the new, and the next in LinkedIn. Now, you might wonder, why are we talking about LinkedIn profiles right now? There are some new tools coming into the space, and there's been some changes in LinkedIn profiles. And what they're starting to do now is pull the About section up to the top of your profile again. So it used to be at the top of your profile, and then they introduced this featured section and your content, and everything kind of got in the way. And they said, okay, we're going to go back to the way that it used to be and lead with your About section. So how do we grab people in that first part of the About section so that they really want to stay and read what we have to say? Hi, Victoria. Thank you for joining us today. Good to see you. We want to be able to engage the reader, but also understand kind of the trade-offs. So I like to think about the About section as a cover letter in theory. So if I'm reading someone's profile, I typically am only going to read the rest of their profile if it matches what I'm looking for in the fastest skim or scan that I can do. And if you look at especially LinkedIn profiles on your phone, you'll notice that the most prominent pieces of someone's profile are their headline and their job titles. Those things are big and bold and bigger text. And thinking about how you can stand out with those areas is really important. Um, Hi, Jane. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Chris. We will talk about AI and how it can help you. You just have to be careful so that, one, you don't end up sounding like everybody else, but two, that we don't lose the power of your story. And so we're celebrating Coaching Week again this week. I thought it was last week. Now they're saying it's this week. I don't know, whatever. We can celebrate it twice because it's really important. When we're talking about content, so resume or profile, or even the answers to interview questions, I'm very hesitant to have AI write those for us for more than just the reason of maybe sounding like everyone else or being obvious that we used AI, which AI uses certain words that make it obvious. Newer systems do less of that, but that's really not the point. The point is when you don't know your story, you are hollow. It's kind of like getting that hollow chocolate Easter bunny, right? It looks good on the outside and you take a bite and then it's like nothing. It's just air. Remember the first time we got one for one of my sons, like, Mom, there's nothing on the inside, right? We don't want our stories to feel like that. So when you don't think about your story, your brand is what we call it, but it's not branding like most people think about branding. It's your core. What is important to you? What are your strengths? What are the things that you do really well? And then how does that connect to what the employer is looking for? And when you don't think through that and you don't come up with stories, real things that you've done that connect the dots between who you are and the value that you offer for an organization, when you tell that story that maybe AI came up with, and even if you stick in your resume and you ask it to come up with stories, they're still hollow because they aren't something that you're telling. So we've got to be careful about that, not just because it's easy to see, because it is, but it's also easy to identify because it's got that hollow essence, nothing underneath it. There's no connection, there's no marketing there. So I like to say that AI can write fiction, AI can write marketing copy. The challenge with resumes and LinkedIn profiles is that it's really neither, because it's your stories, and AI can't write your stories because they're not out there on the internet for whatever 90% of us. It could write stories for Richard Branson or people that are always on the internet, but for the everyday person, it cannot write your stories because it doesn't have them. So we have to put the stories into it. And then it could help us make them shorter, make them cleaner, make them more powerful, perhaps incorporate keywords, but you have to be careful with that because when you ask AI to put the keywords for this job into your stories, it tends to kind of wipe out your story and just stick the keywords in there. And sometimes they don't make a lot of sense and it doesn't work out real well. So I like to ask it what words or what concepts are my stories missing. And then I've got to go back in and kind of weave those in myself. But this is the challenge for all of us, right? We want things to be faster. And I use AI all the time to write marketing content, but I have to put my own spin in it. And if I'm going to include a story, I have to put my own story in it because it can't do that. It can do a really good job of giving you a template, giving you ideas, giving you a story structure, giving you a post structure for LinkedIn, all of those things. But then you have to put the you in it. And that's where we come into with the resume and LinkedIn content, is that it doesn't work without the you in it. So yes, AI can write you an accomplishment, but it's not yours. And if you copy and paste that, you might find yourself in a sticky situation trying to speak to how you didn't do that when you get into an interview, right? Because you didn't really do that. And it usually is lacking the specifics that make it obvious that you did it. And we've been talking about for a decade about how resumes want to be differentiated with specifics instead of generics from a job description. It doesn't work that way. So when you think about your LinkedIn profile, there's some specific questions that we typically dive into to get that profile out. Why did you get into this type of work? Why did you get into that specific company? What about this work, keeps you coming back and keeps you interested in it? What is your best accomplishment? When we look at LinkedIn profiles, we really want more of the who than the what and the how. The what and the how is still going to be there, but that's kind of your resume content. And the LinkedIn gives you the chance to weave in the who, which AI can't do. So when we think about how it's different and how it needs to be different from your resume, it's kind of uniquely positioned to not be able to use AI to create the content. Now, what I've been playing around with quite a bit for the last year and a half is putting in the answers to those stories and having AI use them to write a profile. So one of my favorite prompts for LinkedIn profiles is to ask ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, doesn't matter which system you use, to give you 4 or 5 structures for a LinkedIn about section. And it will spit out options, right? It'll spit out the option of a narrative or your top accomplishments. So who, what, where, why, how. It can come up with, here's a few different ways to structure your LinkedIn about section. And then you can put someone's answers to those questions into LinkedIn and say, write an about section for this person in all 5 structures. Then what you get is choices. I love AI to give me choices. I don't like it to do really any one thing for me because it's just like when you take an assessment. You take an assessment, it never tells you this is the one thing you should be to, right? It just says here are 10 things that fit with your interests or your skills or whatever. So we want to use AI the same way. I can put in these stories, say, write me 5 about sections following those structures that it just came up with, or if you have one you like, you can plug that in, and it will write you 5 different options. Now you can see what fits best with that person's stories. You can pull from maybe different options and put something together that you like. You got some ideas about ways that your stories can be told, but you still get to choose which stories are told and the order and all of those things. So I like to do that. I hesitate to put in a resume and say, write a LinkedIn profile. Why? Because it can't do anything new or interesting unless you give it new and interesting content. All it's going to do is rehash the stories, maybe put in some keywords, but it usually does that a little bit obvious, like Mad Libs or where you just stuck in a word. That's what I feel like it does. It kind of finds a sentence and it sticks the word in there. So you want to be careful about that. The one thing that I'd highly recommend not to do is use LinkedIn's about section writer. It's bad. I don't know what model they've built it on, but it's significantly worse than any other model out there that's free. Gemini, free version of ChatGPT, which, by the way, yesterday got a huge upgrade. I haven't played around with it enough to share that information yet. Maybe on Friday. Maybe Friday we'll do a special live or something. I don't know. Watch out for that. But they just released a new model that is going to be free. It's going to allow some of the paid features to be available to everyone for free. We'll see how that hits. But you can use almost any version because you are putting in your stories and you're just asking it to rewrite those, which it's pretty good at as long as you give it some parameters and you play around with it. So those are some things that I'd recommend. How love to hear how you all are using it, how you're seeing it used. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for saying hi. Hi, Gary. It's a good evening there in Germany. Anne, good to see you. And Nancy, good to see you as well. So those are the things that I'd recommend for your about section. So you can use your stories and put those in the about section. Let's just do this. If you want some of those prompts, if you're not in our AI for Career Services sandbox, drop me a little note and I'll send you some of those prompts. We're also going to be sharing those in our session coming up in just a few weeks. What is it, June 5th? So June 5th, we're going to be doing a session on LinkedIn from generic to genius. So if you're interested in that, I think this is the right link. We're going to put it up there. Maybe we'll do this. I'm going to put it up there. So this is the information for that session. If you're not in our Career Industry Authority group, you can get a one-off session if you'd like and join us for Denise Bittler and I talking about LinkedIn profiles and how to use all of these systems, especially using AI in some of those storied ways that we were just talking about.